All right, and I think I have everything good to go. So, um, Dave, you might want to angle your camera down just a little bit more so your head is not at the very bottom of the screen. That's good, and we should be good to go.
All right, and then help me with the pronunciation of your name. Just make sure
Uche
I'm doing
Okoroha.
Uche Okoroha.
Okoroha. Yep.
Okoroha. All right. Let me look at one thing real quick.
Okay.
All right. So we'll get started. I'll introduce you. It'll be just a brief introduction because really the whole podcast is about you.
Okay.
And then give you a chance to kind of tell us who you are, and then something will pique my interest, and we'll kind of go off, have a conversation. Um, I don't like to be super prepared for these because I just like it to be conversational. I don't like to have things planned out ahead of time, I like to just see where it goes. So it'll be just me for a couple seconds, and then I'll introduce you, and then ask you basically how you got started, how you got to where you are, and then you can kind of go into it from there.
All right. Let me just close some of these windows here. Be
And if
disturbed.
and if I mess up the pronunciation on the intro, stop me just to make. I want to make sure we get that right. I think I'm good, but I've had my
Okay.
last name messed up enough. I don't want to do it to other people.
Definitely understand that. Okay. All set.
We're good, EJ?
Go right ahead.
Cool. All right. Hello, welcome to another episode of the Businesses Start Here podcast. I'm your host, Dave Villiotti, founder of let's start over. Sorry. Hello, welcome to the Businesses Start Here podcast. I'm your host, Dave Villiotti, founder of Villiotti and Associates. Today we have a guest with us that I met through a trade show. Has a really great product that I'm excited for you guys to hear more about, especially newer businesses getting started. There's a lot of opportunity for you guys to use um, Tax Robot, which is founded by Uche Okoroha, who is our guest today. So, Uche, thanks for joining us. We're excited to hear more about you and your product.
Absolutely. And Dave, thank you for having me. Just to give everybody a little bit of a background on me, I am a tax attorney by trade, and I got my start into the tax credits and incentives world by working at the largest national tax credit consulting firm. And then after a couple of years there, doing a few hundred of these tax credit studies, I decided to go off on my own and found my own tax credit consulting firm. So that was in 2017. And then over the last year, I was really thinking that this whole world of tax credits and incentives hasn't changed in decades. It's, done manually where you collect all of the information and all of the documents, and you're having all of these conversations back and forth. And, it's a really time consuming manual process. So, I put my head together with my business partner, and we went out to a technology developer, and we really thought, how do we automate this process with technology? How are we going to make it a little bit easier, a little bit more efficient for all of the taxpayers claiming these incentives? And that's when we put together Tax Robot. And really, over the past year, we've been developing that, and we launched in January. And we've really gotten good traction with that. And it's really been a positive experience for a lot of our clients that have been using that product to be able to, get their research and development tax credits.
Yeah, so R&D tax credits are an area very few people know about. And if you do know about it, you have no idea how to claim them. So you started off as a tax attorney. Was
Yeah.
was R&D credits or credits specifically an area of focus for you, or how did you get into tax credits as your passion?
Yeah, absolutely. So the R&D tax credit was something that I discovered, working for my previous firm there. And I really thought it was interesting because even before, working with the R&D tax credit, I was working with industries that do qualify for the R&D tax credit. So, architects, engineers, software developers, technology, manufacturing. These are all the industries that I was already used to working with.
Mhm.
So I thought, hey, using my experience, understanding what these guys are doing on a day to day basis, and then just taking a look at the law and applying all of those facts to that specific use case, I thought was very interesting. So I did learn about the R&D tax credit by working on my previous firm there, and then really going through the motions of these R&D tax credits is the best way to understand how it works out in practice, because there's only a certain amount of things that you can glean from looking at the tax code or the case law. But when you're actually getting in and looking at a client's documents and interpreting it, that's when you really start to get used to how to identify what is research and development and what isn't. Because honestly, the name of the tax credit is really a misnomer once you actually look at it, because people think research and development. So, I need to be developing a pharmaceutical drug. I need to be, Apple making the latest iPhone. So they really don't understand what it means. And essentially, research and development in its current version of the tax credit, all it means is technical problem solving.
Mhm. Tell me a little bit more about that. So when you say technical problem solving, what exactly does that entail?
Yeah, sure. So there is a four-part test that's outlined in the Internal Revenue Code, Section 41, that houses the research and development tax credit. And essentially, if you want to boil down that four-part test, that's what we talk about when we say technical problem solving, because essentially it's using your background in the sciences to solve technical problems. So, for example, let's say you are a software developer and you have an idea for a product, a software that you want to develop, and the end goal, all of the features, all of the properties of the software that you wanted to have when you're done developing it. But how do you get from that point A to point B? And that's where you're using your background of the sciences, that's computer engineering, to solve these technical problems. So that's going to be, wireframing, coding the software manually. That's going to be that quality assurance process where you're going through and you're seeing those bugs, and then you're going back to the drawing board. Okay, I have this bug. How do I solve that? Do I change, this variable? Do I change this variable? Okay, let me go through and let me retest that. So, that systematic process of trial and error there. That's one of many examples of technical problem solving.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding of the R&D. Like you said, it's a misnomer of the name. So you mentioned that architects, engineers, software developers are good candidates typically for these credits. Um, Tell us a little bit more about the credit itself. Like what can you get back as a percentage, or how it's calculated? Just tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the official name for the tax credit is called the Credit for Increasing Research Activities. So it does take a look at where you are at today with all of your expenses. With research and development, such as the employee wages you pay to those individuals that are doing technical problem solving, your supply expenditures, if you're a manufacturer and you're making a prototype, for example, or your independent contractor cost, doing some of those same technical problem solving as employees are doing. So, what are you paying today? And what were you paying over the previous 3 years? There is the most simple calculation there. And the more those expenditures increase over time, the higher your tax credit is going to be at the end of the day there. But typically, at a maximum there, especially if you are a startup company, we're seeing about 10%, return on your spend as far as those qualified research and development expenses there. But like I mentioned, it varies a lot from company to company, and depending on what industry you are, what that trend has been over the past few years. So, what we always say is, hey, go ahead and talk to a consultant, and most consultants will be able to give you a free estimate by collecting some high level figures there and being able to calculate that for you.
Are there certain, so like we said, we mentioned the types of businesses that generally qualify. Is it really open to anybody though? Like those are ones that usually would hit that mark, but what types of businesses have you seen take advantage of this?
Yeah, so it is open ended. A lot of businesses can take advantage of it. And the good thing is that the government is trying to incentivize keeping these technical jobs within the US instead of outsourcing them. So they're not going to have a list of different industries and say, okay, only these industries qualify and nothing else. They left it open ended for a reason. So typically, with my business and my practice, all of our clients, our bread and butter is, five industries, and that's architecture, engineering, manufacturing, technology, including software development, and also construction. And those are the industries that we see most often, having good size R&D credits. But other studies, that I've worked on: apparel, breweries, agriculture, you name it. If you're able to have any type of technical problem solving that's inherent in the work that you do, you could qualify for the R&D tax credit.
Right. So it's a pretty robust credit, like we said a few times already. Not many people understand it or even know that it exists. So if you're new to business or this is the first time you're hearing about it, what would you say the next step is for you to try to take advantage of one of these credits?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is make sure you have all of your expenses on hand, and that you have a good record keeping system there. Typically, when you go to speak with a consultant, which I definitely recommend as the next step, just to determine if you qualify or not. But they're going to ask you, okay, hey, what were your employee wages? For the past few years, what were you spending on those supplies, those independent contractor expenses? What were your gross receipts there? How has your business grown over time? What are the type of projects that you typically work on? What are your employees doing on a day-to-day basis? So the biggest crux of the R&D tax credit here is not hey, do I qualify or not? A lot of times is, do I have all of the information prepared to be able to correctly substantiate that tax credit? So having your record keeping there, having an idea of what you've been doing on your projects, over the past few years, if you can start to collect that information and bring that to a professional and really be able to determine if you qualify or not, is the best first step towards taking the R&D tax credit.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So tell us a little bit more about how Tax Robot is taking that process and making it easier for people to get
Mhm.
these credits.
Yeah, definitely. So the traditional way of doing the R&D tax credit is, exactly what I was just describing here. Hey, you're going to collect all of this financial information, and then you're going to collect all of this project information, and then you're going to send it over to a consultant, and then you're going to have a discussion with them, to make sure that they understand everything that they're taking a look at there and what your employees are doing. And then they're going to do an initial calculation, and then they're going to give you an estimate, and then you're gonna come back and you're gonna tell them about your projects, on a different teleconference, and then they're gonna go back and then they're gonna do more calculations, and it's really a long and complicated process. And I should say, I know from experience, doing this for the better half of the last decade, typically it does take a couple of months to complete that process. With Tax Robot, we've seen clients be able to complete this process in as little as a week if they have all of the documentation collected there. And really, if it's just a current year study, a 1 year study, and they have all of the documentation there in front of them, they can complete it in 1 day there. And that's because of the process of Tax Robot being more efficient than just working with a typical consultant there. So you are going to have all of that information, that's pulled into the system there. But then using technology, we're able to automate a lot of these estimations and these calculations and the reporting process and drafting all of that, using the software that we've developed there. So typically it's a lot quicker. And then going forward into the future, because all of that information is stored into the system and we are able to identify those trends year after year, it's a lot quicker to just add that. That most recent year for the R&D tax credit calculation, because all of your information is stored into the system and the system understands what is your business type, where are those expenses typically, and which types of projects on your company does and doesn't qualify.
Awesome. Awesome. So let's shift gears here a little. Usually, I get into who you are and get to know you a little bit more before we learn about the business. But the R&D credit to me is so interesting and underutilized that as soon as you started talking about it, I wanted to get into it. So let's shift gears a little bit here and talk a little bit more about you
Yeah,
and how
absolutely.
you started the business. So you started at a consulting firm, then you
Yes.
left and started your own firm, and then you started Tax Robot. So tell me a little bit about that journey between the consulting firm you worked at and then starting your own firm. What made you make that jump, and what were some of the things that you were excited about? Maybe some of the things that scared you about it.
Yeah, really thinking about it, when I was at my consulting firm, that's where I met my business partner. We worked at a lot of these tax credit studies together, and we were thinking to ourselves, hey, we're really doing everything on this tax credit study from the time that the client comes in the door to the time that those reports go out of the door as well. And there's a lot within that process that I feel that we were really constrained by the rules and the
Mm,
processes of our consulting firm. And we were thinking, hey, we do have these suggestions to make this process better, but I think that with the way the consulting world is, a lot of times consulting companies are stuck in their ways of doing things, and they're
right,
not leaning into innovation, and they're not leaning into new ways of doing things that might be a little bit better or more efficient or even easier for the client there. So we thought, hey, we can make these changes, we can make this process better by going off on our own, which was the exciting part of it. Having all of that in our control and being able to service our clients the way we wanted to and having that freedom over the process was very exciting.
yeah,
Now, the scary part is that as an entrepreneur, as having your own business, you can't just collect that steady paycheck and you can't just walk into work and, have work on your desk and be able to do all of that. Unfortunately, it's kind of, an eat what you kill type of
right,
thing. And we knew nothing about marketing, business development, anything like that. We were experts at the R&D tax credit. We were not experts at marketing and running a business. So that was the biggest struggle for us. Of course, we can't take any of our clients,
right.
from our previous consulting firm. So we had to start at ground zero. And really, the first thing that we did was we started reaching out to friends and family. We were like, hey, does anybody that we know own an architecture or engineering firm? Does anybody we know somebody that owns a construction company? Do we know anybody that owns a software company? Anything like that? We called all of our friends and all of our family, and we got nothing. Nothing at all. No leads, from anybody on that end. So,
That's
pretty terrifying to start out
yeah,
with,
that's a scary way to start for sure.
Exactly, because that's the easiest way. And when anybody starts a business, I don't care if you're starting a consulting business, or if you're selling candy bars, or whatever you're doing, you're always going to go to your friends and family first. That's the
Right.
first stop. And to have that come up with nothing, it's like, okay, we need to go back to the drawing board. So we
And
just
it's not
started getting.
entirely surprising either because it's a very specific product service that you're offering. So it's not,
Exactly.
I'm sure you knew that was a possibility, but we're hoping that that wouldn't come to that.
Oh, I absolutely knew it was a possibility because it was so niche. If we were starting a company like, say we design websites, well, everybody knows what a website needs one. So I could go to any friends and family I know in any type of business, in any type of industry, and say, hey, you need a website. I design websites. You know what it
Right.
is. That's perfectly fine. Here, it is very niche. It's only certain industries. And then, oh, by the way, once we identify the people in those certain industries, now we have to actually teach them what the R&D tax credit
Right.
is, because it's
Yeah.
not like a website. They don't know what it is or why they need it. And then after we teach them what it is, we have to teach them how they qualify as well. And then once we do all of that, it seems like one of those concepts that's too good to be true,
Right.
because it's like, you're telling me that the work I already do right now qualifies for this tax credit that even my CPA hasn't told me about, and I can claim it, I can get all of this money back. We're like, yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Right.
It's like trying to convince somebody that money grows on trees, right?
Right.
So the barrier to entry as a new company coming into the R&D tax credit is identifying those businesses, educating them on the R&D tax credit, and convincing them that they qualify, which was incredibly hard, coming out there. So after coming up with nothing from the friends and families, we just got on the phone, and literally we just started calling people, and we made hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of calls a day until we started getting traction, and we started getting people that were willing to take a chance on us. And we just made sure that we did the absolute best work possible for
Yeah.
those initial clients that we got into contact with. And once they saw our work and how dedicated we were, we just started to receive referrals from there, and that's how our business grew. Most of our clients right now are referrals from previous clients we've worked with.
What sales experience did you have before you started making those phone calls?
Zero. Absolutely zero sales experience. Had never been on a sales call. Had never even done, like, I had my brother sold cell phone plans
Mhm.
in high school. Like
Yeah.
those little kiosks in the mall. I
Right.
didn't even have that type of sales experience.
Yeah.
Never had to sell anything in my life. So I was literally like, my first sales calls, the people that I called early on, in my career here. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
It's probably a very awkward, very awkward discussion here for me. I was so bad. But over time, as you get used to it and you get a little bit more comfortable, you
Right.
do get better at the whole, sales conversations.
Yeah. So it's definitely an interesting move, especially the stereotypical tax attorney is not in any way, shape, or form confused with a salesperson, right? So it's like
That's exactly right.
generally they're not not the most outgoing. Luckily, you obviously have a great personality and probably picked it up pretty quickly once you started. But getting outside your comfort zone is probably the number one task of a founder of a business. I mean, you're doing everything: sales,
Exactly.
accounting, marketing. Like you said, you didn't have experience with that, so it's interesting to see that the number one thing that you need is customers, and that's the one thing you didn't have experience in.
Wearing all of the hats there, and the most difficult, at least, to pick up for me and my business partner as well, was sales. Because the thing about it is, it's very hard psychologically to differentiate somebody rejecting your idea
Yeah.
and rejecting you as a person.
Right.
So it's like, oh, I've just been rejected. And it's like,
Right.
well, no, they don't hate you as a human being. They just don't want an R&D tax credit. So
Right.
it's like, you can get in your head and be all upset about that. You're like, okay, well, this person said no. I just have to keep on calling and find the person that is in need of an R&D tax credit. That's it. I can't get hung up on the failures. I just have to keep on going until I find somebody that says yes.
Yeah, and it's absolutely a numbers game. You can be an awful salesperson, but if you make call after call after call, you're going to close some at some point. If you're
Exactly.
an incredible salesperson and don't make a call, you're not going to close anything. So as long as you're willing to put the work into sales, even if you're terrible at it, at some point you will get somebody to bite. And that first
Exactly.
customer is always the hardest one to get because now you may have a testimonial, you'll have referrals, and you have the business kind of built from there.
Exactly. And I think in this industry as well, having those testimonials and referrals is especially important, especially because, we're contacting these companies and they're like, okay, what do I need to get started with an R&D tax credit? And we're like, okay, your employee payroll records, your tax returns from previous years, all of this incredibly confidential financial information. And they're like,
Right.
okay, well, do you have any references or referrals? No, but just go ahead and send over your tax returns there. So having at least one person that can vouch for you,
Right. Yeah.
incredibly important if you're working in tax.
Yeah, you can't send them to your former employer for a reference at that point, right?
No, that would not have worked out well for us.
So as you started to grow the business, you how long did you start the business before you started Tax Robot?
5 years.
5 years.
5 years.
So
Our company is Paracore Consulting. So 5 years before Tax Robot was started.
you were doing things probably slightly differently, it sounds like, but still generally the same way that it had been done for since the credit became available. At what point did you realize that the technology could help you streamline this? Like you said, take it from months down to a few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we first went off and started our consulting company, you're exactly correct. There are some tweaks, that we made to the process there, but the process was still a manual process. It wasn't really dependent upon technology in any way there. And then at a certain point, I did have a lot of friends that were starting to get into the realm of technology. I had a couple of friends that went off and they started software companies, and I really started researching into software development and technology, and what makes for a good software company and how people get started in that industry. And the main thing I was seeing is, the best ideas for software is taking a process or an industry or a business that already exists and just making it better and
Mm.
making it more efficient. So I started to take a look at my business and my industry, and I was thinking, okay, what are the biggest headaches for me right now? And could I build some type of software, to automate this a little bit? So we didn't start off by diving into the deep end and just having a developer, throw together everything. We started little by little automating certain parts, of our business with technology. We made some templates, for our clients to fill out. We would send them some Excel documents there, and we started to piece together. Okay, here's what the process would look like. First, document collection. Okay, what is a better way to collect documents? Okay, now qualifying projects and doing that contract review. Okay, how do we streamline this a little bit? Okay, the end portion of doing the calculations and drafting this report, how do we streamline that version? So once we started testing out these mini automations, as I call them, with our actual live clients, we started
Right.
to get the roadmap of how we're going to piece all of that together to make that into a software. And that took Oh wow, that took the greater part of 2021. We probably spent all year doing that, and then summer of 21, summer to fall of 21. That's when we started working, with the developers there, so we could launch January of this year, January 2022.
And at what point did you realize that that would be a separate product as opposed to the consulting, or do they are they kind of one and the same now that your consulting clients you run through Tax Robot?
Absolutely. So we started out, making it a completely separate product, a completely separate company, because we didn't know how people were going to react to it. Would they love the software? Would they hate the software? So we didn't want to overwhelm everybody within our consulting company. So that's why it was initially separate. And then what we would do is we would take a handful of our consulting clients and we would move them over to Tax Robot. We would say, hey, this is this new software, Tax Robot. We think it's an easier and more efficient way to claim the R&D tax credit. So, we did a few of those studies that we did over the platform, in Tax Robot, and then slowly we started moving more consultant clients over to Tax Robot, and the response was overwhelming in the amount of clients that we had that were telling us, hey, this was a lot easier. And these are clients that have been working with us for several years now. They're like,
Right.
hey, we really like it. We really enjoy it. So it was just a couple of months ago where we made the decision that we are moving all of our clients. 100% of our paracore consulting clients over to Tax Robot. So by spring of next year, 2023, we will be running all of our clients out of Tax Robot.
Awesome. That's very interesting. Especially one of the notes I wrote down is that the consulting industry is not open to innovation very often, and I agree with that completely. But I think it's shifting as you see
Mhm.
more and more younger entrepreneurs get into the consulting space. So it's interesting to see that you're shifting the 100% of the consulting over to this platform. There's still obviously human touch involved, and you're still managing relationships, but you're leveraging technology probably even more than you expected when you started the firm.
Exactly. And that's exactly correct. And especially with taxes, we don't ever, want to completely remove that human element. So
Right.
there are still professional consultants supporting each one of our clients 100% of the way through the process there. And there are still professional consultants doing a manual quality assurance and quality control before any of these documents that are delivered there. But the amount of calculations and reports and these tax credit studies coming through with the bandwidth of our consultants now, it's much greater
Mm.
utilizing the software than it would be without it.
Yeah, that's great. A lot of people are afraid to move to technology. I know there are AI apps that in the accounting industry that I always had not fear, concern that if it's 100% automated, there's nobody checking it except for us. And as companies came out and started modifying that a bit, we started getting more involved with some of those technology companies. So having that individual touch, I think, is important, not only for product quality, but for relationship with customers and being able to get those customers to switch from essentially no technology to a very high technology platform.
Exactly. We never want to leave our, any of our clients without somebody, a human being there that they can talk to, that they can walk them through the process. And, most importantly, somebody that's going to be there to provide audit defense too,
Yeah.
in case any questions come up regarding any of these tax credit claims. I think audit defense and having that support of a professional, is extremely helpful there. And that's both with the clients that we're working with directly, and then also with our Tax Robot agency product, which we are releasing to CPAs and accountants that want to be able to do R&D tax credit calculations for their own clients. We support all of their clients that they're putting onto the platform as well.
Awesome. So I think we're just about out of time for the podcast. What I'd like to ask everybody is kind of the final question is what advice would you have for somebody starting a business or recently starting a business that you wish you had got?
Yeah, I would say the first thing is talk to as many people as possible. Any issue that you're facing in business, any obstacle that you've gone through, I guarantee you somebody else has gone through that before. So having the right people to reach out to and having those mentors that have gone through the same problems you have is going to help you out a lot to be able to bounce ideas off of them. So that's the first thing that I would say. And then the second thing that I would say is find the right business partner. And that's extremely important because having the wrong business partner is that you're constantly, butting heads with is going to be more detrimental to your business
Yeah.
than it is helpful. But if you do find, that right business partner or that associate, or even if it's the first employee that you hire, if you don't want a business partner there, make sure that that is the right person, somebody that's aligned the same way that you are, somebody that has that passion for providing that good customer service and building a business up, I would say is the most important thing. So, to summarize both of those pieces there, I would say people. Finding
Yeah.
the right people, reaching out to those people, and surrounding yourself with those people that are going to help you become successful.
Yeah, that's great advice. Getting the right people around you. Yeah, absolutely makes a difference. Whether they're on your team or someone you talk to, having the right people around you makes all the difference. And I think that's really what helps businesses survive or not is having sounding boards.
Absolutely.
Uche, thanks so much for joining us today. It was great learning more about how you started the business, and learning about tax credits. So I knew enough about them. I think when we talked the first time, I told you we farm it all out because it's not a strength of ours. But I learned a good bit today about the credits and some of the processes. And we talked before this. There's some clients we'll be sending your way in the next couple of days here. So thanks again for joining us. I really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit better.
I appreciate it, Dave. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. All right, that was another episode of the Businesses Start Here podcast. Thanks again to Uche. Be sure to check out his website, taxrobot.com. They're doing some great things in the R&D space. Obviously, you could tell by everything he said, he's an expert in that area. Their software makes everything so much easier for you. So be sure to check them out. And thanks for joining us. And thanks for watching the podcast today. If there's any topics you'd like to see us discuss, any people you'd like to see us interview, please let us know. And we look forward to growing with you, and we'll talk to you next time.